My blessings and love to you all. I am Aaron. I hope you've had a good morning and are entered fully into the retreat. Above all, I hope you are finding a bit of peace and stillness this morning. There are no beginners in the group, but sometimes some repetition is helpful. Just at the beginning of a retreat, bringing you back into the core of the practice. So I will start there and then branch out. Again, one moment while I get this. I'm playing with the controls here. Yes, that opens the screen. With Vipassana, we start with a primary object. For some of you, that object is the breath. Others will use other objects. Now, I can only see 5, 10, 15. I can see only 25 of the 30 plus of you on my screen. But still, how many of you use the breath as a primary object most of the time? The breath that's fine. And the breath is an object that's central in the body. It's easy to work with the breath. It's right there every moment. Sometimes it's coarse, sometimes it's fine. Sometimes it's a long breath or a short breath. How many of you have ever practiced with Anapanasati? The Anapanasati Sutra. Okay, so this is the Sutra on awareness of the breath. We'll talk about it a bit at another time. Interesting that a few of you have worked with it. The breath is a conditioned object. It arises because the conditions are present. It ceases when the conditions cease. There are other objects that are more subtle than the breath. I know some of you have worked with these as a primary object. Nada, the sound of silence, the cosmic Om. How many of you sometimes work with a nada as a primary object? Luminosity. How many work with luminosity at times? Energy. Spaciousness. So there are so many different primary objects we can use. The important thing is to settle on one, not to hop from one to another in any one setting. You can use them in different settings, but choose one and strengthen the clarity of your relationship with it. These last objects that I mentioned, nada, luminosity, energy, and spaciousness, are what we call direct expressions of the unconditioned. They're still of the conditioned realm. They arise from conditions. But the only condition they need is the unconditioned, because the unconditioned is there's spaciousness, there's luminosity, etc. Whereas the breath also needs a physical body. So there's that small distinction. Any of them are appropriate objects in the beginning of practice. But as your practice deepens, the breath may become too coarse an object, and it may be helpful to move to a different object. Just resting in that sound, like cicadas chirping. Nada. It's not a sound in the ears. Let's pause and listen for it. Just breathing. Even if there is sound, like my voice, you can still hear nada. Little crickets chirping in the background. And just out of curiosity, how many of you hear it, or think maybe you hear it? Okay, good. If you don't hear it, no problem. Now let's move on to another one. Here I'd like you to open your eyes, and if possible, to look out a window. You will see daylight, of course. You will see grass, trees, houses, whatever your view may be, sky. This is conditioned. The realm of conditions, and the light that you see, the sunlight playing on these objects, is conditioned. Now I'd like you to just relax back into your chair and look at ideally, some tree branches against the sky. Begin to feel if there is a sense of light, luminosity, permeating everything that you see. Not the sunlight, but something more. It's okay to be uncertain whether you see it. It's okay not to see it. As you see it, if you see it, there's probably also a sense of joy, maybe of spaciousness. So here we have two objects, luminosity and spaciousness, which may come together. For some they often come together, for others separate. But one will be predominant, luminosity or spaciousness. I'm curious now. This was very short time to experience this. But for those who did experience some degree of luminosity or spaciousness, was luminosity predominant? Let me see. Was spaciousness predominant? Some of each. No right or wrong to it in your practice. The point here is, this is a primary object. Let's go back to that, eyes open, looking out. Experiencing luminosity and perhaps spaciousness, or spaciousness and perhaps luminosity. Can you also experience energy? Not your energy, but the energy. The great energy of being, of the universe. It's almost inseparable from luminosity and spaciousness. But each, depending on your karmic tendencies, will more fully experience one face of it. Can you feel the energy there? Thank you. All right, come on back to your screen for now. We offer these as primary objects. If you begin to get lost in the spaciousness or nada, come back to the breath. Ground yourself in the body. Otherwise, for this more advanced group of practitioners, it may be useful for you to choose any one of these: nada, luminosity, spaciousness, energy, and use that as a primary object. We distinguish here between a primary object and predominant object. The primary object is the resting place. And then something comes along and taps you on the forehead. Bump! That is predominant. Knock on the head. Oh! Where did spaciousness go? Where did luminosity go? It seems to shift back and forth, there with a primary object and then moving to a predominant object. A body sensation, a sound, something seen or heard, a thought. These arise out of conditions and become predominant. The heart of your practice is watching the habitual patterns. A heart of your practice is watching the habitual patterns that arise with new predominant objects. If you relate it to a strong smell with aversion and anger, you'll probably relate to the acorn dropping on your head with aversion and anger. When you can relate to the skunk with first knowing, smelling, skunk, contact, consciousness of the contact, perception, knowing it as a skunk smell, feeling of unpleasant. We move through these not step by step thinking about it, but the teacher Ajahn Chah likened it to falling out of a tree. We have this whole process of dependent origination, but you're not so aware of contact, consciousness, feelings, perceptions, just branches and then crash. Gradually, as you meditate, the process does slow down. When we know feelings as feelings, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, when we know perception as perception, an angry face or a skunk, there's much less reactivity. You are able to move through the experience of that object from a heart-opened, centered space and back to the primary object, not to avoid what became predominant, but because it simply no longer holds your attention. then you can begin to respond with kindness, not to be so reactive. So here you are. Look out your window again. We'll spend a minute or two here and invite you to settle into either the breath or light, luminosity, spaciousness. Maybe an experience of joy and ease that comes with spaciousness. Just resting in that spaciousness, resting in ease, resting in love. There's nothing armored around you in this moment. The body uncontracted, the mind uncontracted, the heart uncontracted. Now in a minute I'm going to let out a loud yell. I'm warning you ahead of time, but you don't know when it's going to come. Are you already contracting with my saying I'm going to yell? Relax. My yell won't hurt you. But I want you to watch contraction. First, touching. Ears touching the sound, hearing. Contact and consciousness. Either perception, shout, or feeling, unpleasant, will come first, and then the other. Feeling and perception. And then perhaps mental formations will arise. Fear. People are always yelling at me. Maybe that's the thought that comes. Or, I shouldn't be bothered by this sound. Maybe that's the thought that comes. It's just a thought. Don't give it credence. It's just a thought. So I want you to watch this whole process run through. And as the contraction releases, just allow yourself to come back to the luminosity, to the spaciousness, or to the breath. This is what we're going to do now. There's no right way to be doing this. Just let's see what happens for you. Here it was a beautiful morning. Now the sun has gone and it's grey. But the grass is turning green. And there are squirrels scampering up and down the trees. Hey! Nothing right or wrong that you were doing, just present. Contact and consciousness, startled. And then there may be a secondary predominant object, contraction. The sound is gone. Is your body still contracted? Are you still reverberating from that shout? That's okay. This is then the predominant object. Just be with it. As the contraction dissolves, is there more spaciousness? Just rest in that spaciousness. If the breath was your primary object, don't rush back to the breath. Just rest in the spaciousness. Some of you will feel the simultaneity of contraction and spaciousness, and that's fine. The body still shaking with the startledness of that yell. And yet there's also spaciousness. You'll find that you don't have to go back and give energy to that startled response. It's just a neurological response. This is what the body does when it's startled. Let it be. Resting in spaciousness. So, coming back into spaciousness. Eyes open or eyes closed. Coming back to the breath, or whatever your primary object is. And resting there. Hey! Again, startled. Contact. You're touching the object. Consciousness. Hearing, or almost immediately did it go from the sound to contraction? For how many is the experience of the sound still the predominant thing? For how many is contraction the predominant thing? For how many have you moved through it and are simply resting in spaciousness again? Perfect. And for those who aren't there yet, don't worry. I'm not saying you're not doing it right. Just, it takes practice, and that's why we call it practice. Someone in Dharma Path class last month noted that we've been talking about practice for years. And this period in your life, this COVID-19 experience, this is the big show. You're on stage now. This is what you've been practicing for. This is the shout. How can we really do it with more skillfulness and love? So we start with a primary object. When something becomes predominant, we move attention to it. And you become aware that this predominant object changes. First there's hearing. Then maybe there's aversion to that contraction. Let me pause. Let me go back. First there's hearing. Then there is the experience of contraction. Then maybe aversion to the contraction or to the noise that took you away from the stillness and ease of your practice. Nothing can take you away from that stillness and ease. The noise is just being a noise. The fly buzzing around your head is just being a fly. Even the back aching is just being a back. How can we relate to it all with more presence and more kindness? Some of you are familiar with my book, Presence, Kindness, and Freedom. That's it. When we have a presence with whatever is arising, and when the immediate response becomes one of a kindness and inquiry, we find freedom. But when the response is not kindness, is not open-heartedness, then we just stay present with the contraction. What is this contraction? From whence did it arise? Where will it go at the end? Whose contraction is it? Not asking all those questions like, I need an answer. Just raising the question, letting it go. I will announce here to the whole group, those who do not have my book of Presence, Kindness, and Freedom, if you will let Deep Spring know, Donna know, and send just the amounts for mail. I'm not sure how much it is, but just a few dollars. We will send you a free copy of the book. So I offer that to anybody who would like to have the book. Presence with things as they are in this moment. Awareness. Is it pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral? If it's pleasant, does that lead to grasping? If it's unpleasant, does it lead to aversion? If it's neutral, does it lead to boredom, looking around for something different? In what ways am I reactive to the experience of a pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral object? How do these arise? Begin to watch that with mindfulness. If there's aversion, that's the new object. What is the direct experience of aversion? Can you feel the contraction of aversion in the body? When we know an object like aversion as aversion, feel the contraction of it. There's a much less likelihood of self-identification with it. Oh, this also arose out of conditions, and there it goes. I like that. Grasping, I want that. Just letting it go. This grasping arose from conditions. You don't have to know the conditions. At some point after you're sitting, you may want to look at it with thought. What is the grasping about, or what is the aversion about? But during the sitting, just knowing, grasping or aversion. Or neutral, boredom, looking around for something different. What is the experience of boredom? The main point in this kind of practice is that eventually you become absolutely certain that everything in this conditioned realm is arising with conditions and passing away when the conditions cease. Everything. There is much less likelihood of getting caught up in the story, making it about you. Poor me, why does this happen to me? Or why didn't I get that? Just, arising and passing away. Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. We step back a giant step and see it all opening and passing away. As you watch in this way, the watcher in a more how would I phrase it? Phase of more somebody. Me, I'm the watcher. Self-identification with the watcher dissolves, and there is just awareness. Resting in that awareness. What is the experience of resting in awareness? It's a point where there are no longer stories. Things still may be pleasant or unpleasant, but there's no story about it. The smell of the skunk is just the smell of a skunk, and it's acid, burning, unpleasant. Awareness feels the experience of the skunk in a very different way than the ego does. Many of you have practiced in these ways. As the practice deepens, to the point that the sense of a separate self at least temporarily dissolves. Experiences still come and go, but there's no going after them or pushing them away. As long as the five senses and body and mind exist, the five physical senses and mind exist, objects will continue to arise into the experience. What is the self that gets caught up in the objects? Who is it? As your practice deepens so that objects are simply like popcorn, popping, 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 and dissolving, you move into a phase of a practice called access concentration. Things still arise and dissolve, but there's no going out or pulling back from them. Because it's no longer an ego self regarding them. Two important things happen at this stage of practice. On the one hand, living your everyday life as you become more stable with access concentration, you are simply less reactive. You're able to respond from a place of wisdom and compassion. The other piece of this, access concentration, access to what? With access concentration, the chitta, or consciousness, that's capable of perceiving the unconditioned, has opened. Instead of seeing it I'd like you to put your hands up, one hand up in front of your eyes, and wiggle the fingers and watch the fingers. This one is the body, this is hearing, this is mind, this is scent, vision. They're all wiggling around. Now, watching the fingers, shift your gaze a bit. Keep the fingers wiggling and look at me right through the fingers. Can you see how you can see right through them, the space between them? Hold them up close to your face, close to your eyes. Not so far away, but just a few inches from the eyes. Can you see me here, waving at you? The fingers are still there. All the aggregates of self are there. The mind, the body, they're all there. But the space between the fingers becomes predominant. We do not want to disregard the fingers. This is the ground of compassion. The everyday experiences of all sentient beings. Sometimes pleasant, sometimes unpleasant. We also don't want to be locked in a self-identification. Oh, this finger, look, it has a little sore on it. Oh, what am I going to do? It's just a finger. We don't want to become lost in the space either, so that we forget about the fingers. How do we balance with both? This phase of excess concentration allows us to be present with the mundane objects of our world from a place of spaciousness and wisdom. Excess concentration in some ways is the marriage of wisdom and compassion. For those of you who have practiced with me for quite a while, many of you have some stability with excess concentration. If this is so, when excess concentration arises, let there be a very small noting of it. Then just presence. Here is the place where there is an opportunity to shift more from mundane experience into the supramundane. Is there any resistance to that shift? Presence here with luminosity, with energy, with spaciousness. This will help. What is the goal with all of this? Nothing less than liberation. Liberation from the old karmic patterns that have held you repeating over and over that which is unwholesome out of fear. And out of ignorance of who you truly are, beyond these aggregates of the mundane self. What are you? Who are you? People have asked me for the past month, how can I best be of service with this pandemic? And I have a one-word answer. Love. What does love mean? Love means to come home to the awakened heart, to watch the arising of fear, even panic, of anger, of grief, with compassion, not trying to get rid of these experiences, but with a huge, compassionate heart for you and all beings thusly experiencing. This high energy vibration, let me say it differently. This virus is a sentient being of sorts. It's a parasite. It feeds off low vibration. A high vibration, a loving vibration, is uncomfortable for it. The best way you can bolster your own immune system and help others to bolster theirs so they are not prey for the virus is love. I don't mean to be simplistic, but I know of no other way to state it. But when you are feeling a fear and unable to feel love, just be present with the fear and hold it tenderly in your hands. Most of you should have gotten the Kasich crystals that Terry sent out. Take that crystal in your hand and bring it to your heart. Feel the love in that crystal and the light. Feel the fear in your heart, the anger, the grief. And don't try to get rid of these objects. But know, right there with fear and grief, and anger and confusion, right there is spaciousness. When you're feeling overwhelmed with some kind of heavy emotion or thought, come back to the loving heart. Hold the crystal and bring it to your heart. And let the crystal help reawaken in your heart the love that is your essence. Here, of course, I'm blending the Vipassana practice and going beyond. It does start with practice, mundane practice, being present with whatever is predominant in your experience. As it fades away, coming back to the primary object. Please let there be a choiceless awareness that does not say, no, this object is bad, I should have that object. Be honest with yourselves. Whatever is predominant, that's predominant. Hold it tenderly and ask, what did you come to teach me? You might even be able to say, thank you for coming to teach me. I don't like you. I don't want you. You terrify me, but what did you come to teach me? So opening your heart and your energy to whatever you are experiencing without saying, I should feel this, I shouldn't feel that. Simply, this is what is predominant in this moment. And I have the capacity to be with it, with compassion, and allow it to teach me, so wisdom grows. So love and an open heart become more accessible. So freedom becomes more accessible. Freedom to the old reactivity, the old habitual patterns that have pulled me down. Right now, are there any questions about what I have said? Let me open the chat box. Say more about access concentration. Every chitta, or consciousness, takes an object. In the beginning of practice, the object is almost always a mundane object. So we're present with the breath, and then there is a sound, or perhaps a physical sensation like an itch. Mind moves to whatever that mundane object may be. It has not yet deepened in the capacity to be present with the supramundane. Mundane chitta can only take a mundane object. Supramundane chitta, C-I-T-T-A, the Pali word for consciousness. Supramundane chitta takes a supramundane object. You cannot hold both a mundane and a supramundane object at the same time, but it can go back and forth so fast that you don't see the distinction. So that it seems that you can be with a mundane object and the supramundane. This is what I mean by resting in spaciousness and bringing present to the fly buzzing around your head. Hearing, unpleasant. But it's not perceived from the contracted small ego self. It's perceived from the spaciousness of awareness, the spaciousness of the supramundane citta, that can truly say, this thought, it simply has arisen from conditions. And because of the condition of hearing, I'm hearing it, touching, it's flitting on touching my hair, unpleasant. But there's not so much contraction around it because you understand so deeply it just arose from conditions. It's impermanent, it will go. Gradually, the perspective of the supramundane citta, access concentration here, becomes predominant. We still relate to the world, but we can relate to the world from a much more open-hearted place, not so much from the ego. What is the direct experience of love? All right, I'm going to end this instruction period by bringing in a friend. I hope he can give you the direct experience of love. And then we're going to close this instruction period. So I'm going to release the body, not to Barbara, but directly to my friend Love. My love to you. You have called me, love, and I have come. I am always present in your hearts. You cannot lose me. I am the heart of the unconditioned. I am not created. I am love, and I embrace you. Sometimes you feel my energy more fully, and sometimes it seems missing. That is only because you have turned your back, like turning your back to a window. Where did the light go? But turn back, and love is here. I have existed since the beginning. Long before there was an earth, with sentient beings on the earth. Amongst other things, I am a ground for the earth, to hold the assurance that love is always here and accessible. I love you very much. I will have more chance to talk with you this week, I hope. So this was just a brief introduction. I hope this is communicated to David and others. What love is. Can you feel me in your heart? You are not separate from me. You have never been separate from me. I am love. You are love. Say it with me. I am love. I am love. I am love. You are. What is love? You are love. Does that answer your question? I love all of you. I'm going to release the body to Barbara. Thank you. Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, love.